Can you tell me about your work on the book Montreal at the Crossroads? I mean, how do you see Montreal, their plan, their highway system? How is it working out?
Basically, the book was very influenced on the evaluations I did of the project since 2007. That's for Turcot yards. And I always had a view that with the reconstruction of Turcot, it's an occasion to really review what the urban transport problems were in that area, or generally in Montreal, and see if there's other ways of dealing with the situation, especially if they're talking about demolishing or replacing segments of highways, which they claim is. There's 2 points in their manifeste de justification, in their justification manual, saying that the reason why they're replacing Turcot is, one, is they want to replace all the structures built rapidly for Expo 67, and secondly is they want to correct a few danger spots or make it more secure. What is the problem with Turcot? It's falling apart. Okay, fine, that has to be replaced. And the discussion, what's the problem with Ville-Marie? Well, it's falling apart as well. I said, yes, is it really? Because the whole question is how much is falling apart? How come it's only in Westmount that it's falling apart and not in Saint-Henri or in Montreal? And the reason is quite obvious. It's political, I mean, they've had a class action suit against the Ministry of Transport back in 2000 because maintaining an elevated expressway is too noisy, and that's why they want to replace it. Because maintaining an elevated expressway is just too noisy for the calm residents of Westmount. Whereas for everybody else in the city of Montreal, it doesn't matter. If you have to replace a structure in an urban setting, well, do it like every other structure that you replace everywhere else on Highway 20 to Montreal, Quebec, or any highway. And you transfer all the traffic on one side and you replace the other side. And they say, oh, Ville-Marie can't do that. So Ville-Marie is 60 feet wide. The structure is 60 feet wide, or 60 feet wide. Which is equivalent to 5 lanes. So I said, you just put all the traffic on one and put a movable barrier and the problem is resolved. So of course they don't want to listen, they all know better. We've got to expropriate. We've got to expropriate and build a new highway beside the existing. Therefore expropriate the 780, expropriate les tanneries, which they still believe they don't have to, but I've done research with structural engineers to say that they will have to. And so basically, the whole approach of building a highway, which was a failure to start with in 1970, it was heavily contested, and it was said that it's not what Montreal needs. It doesn't need an urban highway within its inner city. And it creates a lot of demolition, it creates a lot of anguish, a lot of people suffered, a lot of people were kicked out in the street, a lot of communities were basically destroyed. And I said, look, that's fine, but don't continue that now. It's not the time to continue destroying communities because you made a mistake on a highway, etc., etc. Restez chez vous. If you've got a problem, like any building in Montreal, if a landlord doesn't take care of its building, doesn't give him the right to expropriate his neighbors to rebuild his building. So it's the same with anything in Montreal.
Now, you were talking about the expropriations in Saint-Henri.
Yeah.
Now, the history of the Ville-Marie Expressway and expressways in Montreal have been to expropriate people to build it.
Yeah.
Do you find that that tradition still...
It's still, well, the thing is that when they announced the East-West Highway back in 1948, I mean, it was just total destruction of all the neighborhoods. Then in 1960, when Drapeau came into power, they all criticized Drapeau, it's all his fault and the rest of it. But when Drapeau came into power, he said, look, to minimize the demolition, because at the time a highway had to go through. I mean, everybody had decided the highway had to go through, but to minimize the demolition, we're going to put it up against the escarpment between Turcot Yards to Guy Street, where there's already a natural along the rail line. And he says, well, that'll minimize, okay, yes, there's 845 houses have to be demolished, but that's less than if we went further south. And in the center city area, from Guy Street to Papineau, we're going to put it in a tunnel or a recoverable section, which is completely different, what was planned before, where you had a two-level structures on the commune. And it was because of Guy Legault and the Drapeau administration, it was decided, no, that highway is going to be in a tunnel, and it's going to be the first highway tunnel interchange in the world. It's going to be done in Montreal. Boston copied Montreal, okay? But the first, and it goes 5 levels down. I mean, you've got 5 levels of highway underneath. And it was at first in the world that Montreal created the first underground highway system, not just one tunnel, but the whole network. And okay, fine. But then when it got out to Papineau and further east, it was a bit of, they had already demolished basically 4 Place Radio-Canada, so I mean, there was no problem. It was already done. And then after that, well, in Notre Dame, it was on Notre Dame Street, it was an unfortunate situation. I always say they should have continued tunnel, gone underneath the river and linked up with 132 in Longueuil and gone. You know, I suggested that back in 1970, 72 anyway, in those days. I said to avoid demolition, but no, it's got to stay in Montreal. Well, eras of the past, fine, they're done. But today, you know, I mean, we realized, like we realized in Toronto, that urban highways just don't fit anymore. Jane Jacobs and the Spadina Expressway, Jane Jacobs and all the expressway network in downtown Montreal, in downtown Toronto, I'm sorry. They had the 400 coming downtown, an east-west highway between the Gardiner and the 401. And the thing was, I said, no, that's it, no more highways. And in Montreal, we said, we stopped highways, we prevented the Highway 19 from going through Montreal. And had they built it where it was supposed to be back in 1967, you know, I mean, we wouldn't even, you know, it would have been done. Highway 19 probably would have never been built. And we would have had, you know, a network that was interconnected. Because now we have a whole bunch of little bits and pieces, you know, un petit bout ici, un petit bout là, puis un petit bout là. And the thing is that it was devastating in Laval when they built Highway 19. They demolished, I think, about in that along that corridor, Duvernay, they demolished about close to 1,000 houses to accommodate that thing. But you know, it had to be, and that's the way. Today, you know, urban highways don't fit. And the people, you got to realize that you don't do those things anymore. You don't demolish houses for highways. But I think what's most important is to try and preserve the areas that you already have, like in Saint-Henri. Don't demolish your stock of housing built in the 50s. Try and find a way to preserve them or recycle them or you know, do whatever's maintenance is required. Don't always ask for programs to build new social housing, because all you're doing is taking the problem from here and putting it there. That doesn't resolve anything. You've got to learn to live with what you have and maybe expand the network by filling in the holes and things like this, or the vacant lots. But don't go into, like, they're talking about blue bonnets. What are you going to put in blue bonnets? What are you going to create another ghetto? You say, okay, we're going to build social housing in there and become another ghetto, which is totally isolated from everywhere else? Or is it going to become a more hype area? Especially that they're always looking for detours from the Décarie traffic circle. You know, they're talking about extending Cavendish, and I say, well, then Cavendish with Jean Talon and all the rest of this. But the problem is that we're always trying to accommodate the almighty car. And I find it unfortunate is that we should start thinking of urban planning other than around the importance of the cars and congestion. The way to reduce congestion is not adding more roads, but taking cars away from the roads.
You're mentioning which is a really good point, you're mentioning the housing being torn down for this new idea of an auto route. And I mean, tearing down these housing and then having a newer auto route, whatever they plan to do with it. But then do you think that will in turn make them want to build condos instead of social housing for people? Like artists, like which are traditionally in Saint-Henri, Hochelaga, artists, students?
As far as I'm concerned, they don't have to demolish the 780 because they can rebuild the interchange, conform to the American Standard Highway Association and all the norms. I have all the norms here. Where is it? This. All the norms and standards, how to build a highway in an urban setting, right-hand functions, you know, you get off on the right-hand side and you go wherever you have to go, and all the rest of it. But this obsession of rebuilding the Trans-Canada Highway just doesn't seem to somehow. We're rebuilding a highway which has been cancelled over 35 years ago, but we're still holding on to it, saying we have to rebuild it.